Today I want to take up the case of a Georgia teen that was killed back in 2014 by a police officer. His name is Christopher Roupe, and unfortunately for Christopher, the headline says it all. Georgia teen killed by police was holding a Wii remote, not a gun, family says. In my opinion, what happened to Christopher Roupe is an outrage. A perfect example of where a police officer simply opened fire because she lost her nerves. The Young Turks, they heard about this shooting and they took up Christopher Roupe's cause. We are going to see the Young Turks are going to weigh in and they are going to be outraged over what took place here. They're going to demand justice. This is police brutality, they're going to claim. We're not interested in words. We want action, they're going to say. Well, okay, maybe not really. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnny Walker Dread to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnny Walker Dread Show.
A 17-year-old high school student who wanted to be a U.S. Marine was fatally shot by Georgia police officers who mistook the video game controller in his hand for a weapon, the lawyer representing his family says. Christopher Roupe was preparing to watch a movie when two police officers showed up at the door to execute a probation violation against his father, according to his family. This was all over a probation violation. Police Chief Terry Haggart also stated that two officers arrived at the home on Friday night. When Roupe answered the door, the female officer believed he was pointing a gun at her and fired a single shot at the young man. The police refused to reveal the names of the officers that responded to the scene. Now, if you go back up here, it says a 17-year-old high school student who wanted to be a U.S. Marine was fatally shot by Georgia police officers, plural, but it was really only one officer. That's rather interesting. Roupe was a member of the Reserve Officers Training Corps in high school and has friends who he helped at school. He was a good kid. He always hung out with me and he took up for me, friend William Corson told WSB-TV. A funeral for Roupe is scheduled for Friday, just one day before what would have been his 18th birthday. The young man planned to join the Marines after graduating from high school. Yeah, these are the guys who always answer the door from the police by pointing a gun at them, right? Who in here really thinks that an ROTC student would have answered the door when police officers knocked by pointing a gun at them? Neighbor Ken Yates told reporters he heard the gunshot and saw the female officer seconds after. This is tragic. She came out of his house. She put her head in her hands and she was sobbing, he said. Supposedly, he opened the door with a BB gun. Chief Hargett declined to identify the officer involved in order to protect her privacy. Okay, but referred all questions to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, which is running the probe into the incident. The officer has been placed on administrative leave, the standard measure when an officer is involved in a shooting. Roupe's family plans to file a lawsuit against the department, with Attorney Koloff saying the story simply doesn't add up. We don't know where that statement came from, he said. The eyewitness on the scene clearly stated that he had a Wii controller in his hand. He heard a knock at the door. He asked who it was. There was no response, so he opened the door, and upon opening the door, he was immediately shot in the chest. How hard could it be to figure out what was in his hand? I would assume that after shooting him, they probably didn't disturb the crime scene so much that they couldn't figure out what he was holding. I mean, if he had a real gun, it would be in the house. They would have recovered it. If he had a BB gun, they would have recovered it. What did he have in his hand? His body's right there. There shouldn't be any ambiguity at all. Hilarity is a bedroom community of Cartersville, Georgia, with a population of under 5,000 people, and I don't care. Roupe was a senior at Woodland High School. Okay, in my opinion, this really looks bad. Now, this is 2014, by the way, and the police officer never faced charges. But To me, it is inconceivable that an ROTC student would have pointed a gun at a police officer simply because the officer knocked on the door. I don't know what the police officer saw, but I cannot imagine that she saw him pointing a gun at her. Furthermore, we can pretty well say that there was no real gun at the scene. He did not have it. It's clear he did not have a gun in his hand. They would have recovered it. And if he had had a BB gun in his hand, they would have recovered it. The most logical explanation was that he had a Wii controller in his hand and he was playing a video game when he answered the door. However, the officer never faced any sanctions of any sort as far as I know. Now, the Young Turks have picked up on this. Now, you know how they feel about these police killings. Tamir Rice, Stephon Clark, George Floyd. And they're going to weigh in. And they're going to show their outrage. They're going to show that the police must be held accountable, that this cop must be charged with a crime. Okay, well, maybe not. Let's go ahead and see how they treat this incident.
Police showed up to the Eagle View mobile home park in Georgia to serve a probation violation to a person living in one of the trailers. Well, a 17-year-old by the name of Christopher Roupe answered the door, and apparently the second he answered the door, a female police officer shot and killed him. Now, the police officer alleged that he had a gun. However, neighbors say that he did not have a gun. When they arrived to the scene, he had a Wii controller in his hand.
Okay, you have the body there. What's the body holding? How hard is this? If he had a gun, they would have recovered it. He didn't have a gun. He had a Wii controller in his hand. Anybody can figure that one out.
Now, right now, of course, the story does not have the full details. It could be entirely true that...
Oh, now wait a minute now. We can't jump to conclusions. No. We have to wait for more evidence. Nothing to see here, anybody. Got to be patient.
That there was a weapon involved. At this point, it's a he said, she said type situation.
Oh, it's he said or she said. Come on. We can't make any comments yet. It's he said, she said. One person's word against another.
However, according to the report, or the lawyer for the family, he says, we don't know where that statement came from, referring to the gun. The eyewitnesses on the scene clearly state that he had a Wii controller in his hand. He heard a knock at the door. He asked who it was. There was no response, so he opened the door, and upon opening the door, he was immediately shot in the chest. One neighbor said, when we got up there, they said there was a Wii remote in his hand, and she shot him. Another neighbor says, this is tragic, and then referring to the police officer who shot him, she came out of the house, she put her head in her hands, and she was sobbing. Supposedly he opened the door with a BB gun, and in my opinion, I think he was playing a game with his neighborhood buddies.
I think the reaction of the police officer immediately after the shooting might give you a sense that there might not have been a weapon. Right?
Yeah, the reaction, it might not have been a weapon. When she finally looked at the body and thought, oh my God, he doesn't have a gun.
Right. I don't think that if she shot him and he had a gun in his hand that she would be sobbing outside. Now, he's a young kid, and this is all eyewitnesses, and Anna's right. We'll have to get the full facts, and they'll go through the process, etc.
Oh, yeah, we have to get all the facts. Come on, he's a young kid, but, you know, this will take time. We have to bring in the facts before we can make any comments on it.
But right now, it doesn't look good, right? And every situation is different, and maybe she just overreacted, and that happened to be her at that time, right?
Oh, yeah, she might have just overreacted, everybody. Come on, every situation's different. Don't be too harsh on her. There might be a perfectly good explanation as to for what happened.
But we do cover a lot of these stories, and there is a lot of shoot first, ask questions later. Like I keep saying, I remember the good old days when you'd see it in the movies and the TV shows. Freeze, put your hands up. That's what the cops would say before they shot you. That gives you a bare minimum amount of time to see if it's a Wii controller, you know, or maybe even a BB gun, right? And not a real weapon. But now there's no pause, there's no nothing. We shoot first, and then we go, oh, damn it, oh, well, we shot the wrong person, oh, well. And obviously she's broken up about it.
She
if
is.
the
I mean, there's
witnesses are
remorse,
correct.
whereas, in other cases that we've reported on where the details are much clearer, it seems like the officers are trying to justify what they've done.
Yeah, she felt bad about it. I mean, come on, why don't we all lighten up a little bit? She felt remorse, not like those other cops who shot those black kids. That's different. They didn't show remorse. They must have been guilty.
So we'll see how this develops, but I will say that I remember a time a few years back when we would report on police brutality, and the big issue at that time was their excessive use of non-lethal weapons. So they were using tasers far too often on kids, on disabled people, and it was outrageous. And now it's gotten to a point where they don't even use those non-lethal weapons, they go straight for the gun. And that's obviously a bad way of dealing with any situation. So again, we'll see how this develops.
Let me add one last thing here. To be fair to the cops, one of the
We've got to be fair to cops now.
problems is now there's guns everywhere. The country's swimming, drowning in guns, right?
Yeah, that's not the officer's fault. I mean, come on, there's so many guns around. You can understand what she was facing there. Yeah, he was only holding a weak controller, but with the context of all of these guns around, it's all understandable.
Right? So is it that unfair for a cop that when they open a door to expect somebody in the house to have a gun?
Is that really so out of the question? Go to Tamir Rice. They didn't seem to be asking those questions in his shooting.
I mean, now we're telling people, hey, listen, man, even if you were hurt in a car accident, you might not want to go up to somebody's house because they're likely to, not likely, but there's some chance they're going to shoot you, right? So the cops got to be extra edgy because it's not just them with guns. Everybody else has guns too.
If you're a police officer, you got to be on edge. The shooting here, perfectly understandable. He could have had a gun.
And then that leads to more deaths like this. So it's a bizarre way of being quote-unquote fair to the cops. I'm just saying, we got two different issues here. One is cop overreaction, and the other is that everybody's got guns, so everybody's on edge.
All right, so let's jump ahead here. How did the Young Turks handle the Tamir Rice shooting? Let's listen.
You shot the kid dead in 2 seconds. Justified. Hey, listen, man, have just a shred of humanity and say, hey, man, we feel sick about what happened there. They made a decision in that moment. You want to defend that decision? Say, look, I defended because we have a hard job and yada, all the bullshit you normally say. But don't go and tell us that they had no other choice. They were absolutely justified in shooting within 2 seconds. Nobody, come on, man. But the sick thing is some people do believe that because they want to believe it. No, black people are dangerous, man. You got to shoot the 12-year-olds before you give them a chance to put anything down. Justified. And he's disrespecting all of us. How about Tamir Rice's family? How about Tamir Rice? Did you disrespect him when you shot him dead? Hey, next time before you shoot a kid dead, why don't you ask him to put the thing down, whatever it is, his toy down? Why don't you look first? Why don't you ask questions first? Why don't you say freeze first? Yes, I don't respect that. I don't respect you killing our children. Listen to what the officer said. You killed him in 2 seconds. He didn't have time to listen to what you said. This Orwellian prick, we just saw the video. We've seen the video a million times. You pull up and you shoot him. You pull up and you shoot him. 1,000, 1,000, and he's dead.
Well, there's the problem with our media and the way they treat the whole police brutality deal. I've been harping on this for a long time. Breonna Taylor. Everybody knows who she is. They have statues to her. She's a household name. Rosina Nichols and Dennis Tuttle, nobody knows about them. But they were shot under similar circumstances. Worse, actually. Nobody cares. Dylan Noble in California. Unarmed kid, shot dead by the police. The police have their version of the events, and okay, they're entitled to say them, and they may be right. But the point is, almost nobody knows who Dylan Noble is, because nobody cares. Daniel Shaver, person begging for his life, crawling on a hotel room floor, shot dead. Again, the police have their version of events, and they may be right. I'm not saying that these shootings are justified or unjustified, but I'm remarking on the fact that I have to actually go to Google to try to remember who these people's names are. And you see firsthand why. The Young Turks don't care about Christopher Roupe. They have probably long forgotten his name. His shooting, well, we have to investigate very carefully here. We don't want to jump to conclusions. But Tamir Rice, oh, they'll go all day about that. Rest in peace, Christopher. It's a shame that nobody remembers you. Like my video, subscribe to my channel.